The Disney parks are some of the most magical places in the world, with numerous attractions the entire family can enjoy. But just how safe are those rides? Well, I've compiled a list of 5 attractions at Disney, each of which hide a disturbingly deadly secret. So let's start off with the Haunted Mansion, one of the most notorious attractions at any Disney park. Being the subject of many rumours and urban legends, sightings of ghosts are constantly reported, other than the ones that are actually part of the attraction obviously. But many guests and employees do fully believe that the ride is cursed and indeed haunted. And, well, they may be right. Many guests have been known to scatter the ashes of their departed loved ones at the attraction, with cast members reporting that this does occur roughly around once a month. These ashes though are almost always met with a vacuum cleaner. Disney has made an official statement on the matter of scattering ashes at Haunted Mansion, with a spokesperson saying that this type of behaviour is strictly prohibited and unlawful. Guests who attempt to do so will be escorted off the property. In fact, Disney really doesn't want guests thinking about death at all, and have attempted to distance themselves from the morbidity of death completely. When Disney began installing commemorative bricks in the park in 1994, the phrase "in memory of" was banned from being written on the bricks as not to remind guests of death. The thing is, Disney, if you don't want guests thinking about death, then don't create a big mansion full of death. And I'm not just talking about the ghosts here, because several gruesome and deadly incidents have occurred at the Haunted Mansion. On the 19th of October 1991, a 15-year-old girl was critically injured after getting caught in the tracks of a ride. According to witnesses, she was jumping between the different cars of the ride in order to scare her younger cousin who was in a nearby car. And this is where she slipped and fell onto the tracks, becoming trapped there either under a car or wedged between 2 cars. Here she was then dragged along by the moving cars for at least 50 feet before the cars eventually came to a halt. Rescuers then pulled the teenager from underneath the car, and she was then rushed via helicopter to the Orlando Regional Medical Center in order to treat the injuries to her face and head. It was found that the girl had fractured her skull and had deep cuts to her face. She was then taken into surgery, where neurosurgeons and plastic surgeons attempted to repair the injuries. Disney closed the ride for the rest of the day, citing technical difficulties, and would reopen the ride the following day. The girl did in fact survive the ordeal, however, the same can't be said for our next case. In Disneyland Paris, the Haunted Mansion is known as Phantom Manor, and here a cast member met with an untimely and very gruesome end. On the 2nd of April 2016, cast members were opening the attraction for the day, getting the ride operational and ensuring everything was in order for the guests who would soon be arriving. The thing is though, among the animatronic corpses, a real body was discovered. That of a 45-year-old technician who had been working on the backstage lighting when he was electrocuted and died. The man had worked in the theme park for over 14 years, and a staff union representative stated that he was hugely popular with his colleagues and was always smiling. A further autopsy was ordered, however the death was deemed accidental. The ride was closed for nearly a week whilst police conducted a full investigation. So the next time you're riding the Haunted Mansion, just know that some of those ghosts might actually be real. You may well assume that It's a Small World After All is one of the safest attractions at any Disney park. After all, the attraction is one of the staples of every Disney park, being a fixture since the idea of a Disney park was first envisioned, and since then has been experienced by over 256 million people. However, with that many people, there's bound to be some unfortunate incidents when you consider the 500,000 gallons of water or 2 million litres of water that make up the ride, and all of that heavy machinery. It just seems like a recipe for disaster. So before we get into this one, let's quickly dispel a relatively infamous rumour that you may well be aware of a child who had been hanged from the rafters above the It's a Small World ride in the year 1999. The rumour stemmed from the ride breaking down and guests having to be quickly evacuated. The lights came up and the guests were allegedly told to look straight ahead. And why did Disney tell guests to do that? Why, because obviously there was a dead body hanging just above them. That's right. A woman who pointed her camera upwards and took a picture found that later when the film was developed, she noticed that a child can be seen hanging above her, which at first glance, the photo does look troubling. With context or just the tiniest bit of thought, it is clear that this is little more than one of the animatronic dolls used in the ride. In fact, this specific doll ziplines along above the boats, and what with the ride being stopped midway through, the doll was yet to perform its ziplining feat, and as such is left hanging motionless. Now, whilst this story isn't true, that doesn't mean that there haven't been incidents on the ride which have been almost as darkly grim as the rumours. On the 6th of October 2010, a cleaner subcontracted to work at the Disneyland park was doing a routine clean of the ride. So the way the boats move in It's a Small World involves a flume system consisting of two metal panels in which the boats will travel through, and if you look over the sides of the boats on one of these rides, you'll be able to clearly see this flume system. It is also of note that the flume size is the same width of the boat. This is in order to prevent the boat from moving side to side. As such, if you were to, hypothetically get trapped in the flume system whilst the ride is in operation, the only place you can possibly go is under the boats. So what with the cleaner being a subcontractor who was likely unfamiliar with the ride and the risk the flume system posed, it did in fact lead to the cleaner becoming unfortunately trapped under one of the slow moving boats when the ride turned on. The boats in It's a Small World move at 1.5 miles per hour, meaning that the cleaner would have been very slowly dragged underneath the boats. He was severely injured by this and was luckily rescued before being airlifted by a helicopter to a nearby hospital, where he then, unluckily, died from his injuries. This does bring into question as to how the ride actually turned on. In Disneyland, there's a tagging system on many of the rides. The way this works is there's a cabinet containing plastic tags which workers will take with them when on the ride's track. The ride would normally not be allowed to run if there are any of the tags missing, and this system is obviously in place to prevent any risk to staff. However, a former Disneyland employee stated that whilst this tagging system was indeed a feature of many rides, including Big Thunder Mountain, it was in fact absent from rides like Pirates of the Caribbean and It's a Small World. This thereby puts into question if there was any kind of safety feature implemented in these slow-moving water rides, or if Disney deemed it unnecessary in comparison to the fast-moving coasters, clearly underestimating the real-life danger that these rides posed. As such, it's likely that the operator started the ride without the knowledge that anyone was working inside it, leading to the untimely death of this unfortunate individual. Mission Space is one of Epcot's most beloved attractions, in which riders are placed in a simulator of a rocket taking off and travelling through space. However, for those working on the ride, Mission Space is infamous for the dangers it presents. From June 2005 to June 2006 alone, there were over 194 cases in which paramedics had to be called out. Of these 194, 25 people passed out, 26 were struggling to breathe, and 16 experienced chest pain. One such case occurred on the 13th of June 2005, in which a 4-year-old boy fell unconscious after riding Mission Space. He was then taken to hospital, where he later died. An autopsy identified that the cause of death was the result of an irregular heartbeat, which was linked to an abnormal thickening of the heart muscle tissue. This was a pre-existing condition the family of the boy were previously unaware of, and it can result in sudden death, especially when subjected to physically or emotionally stressful situations. As such, the death was ruled to be one of natural causes rather than the direct result of the ride. The family later filed a lawsuit against Disney, claiming that Disney failed to properly warn riders of any potential hazards associated with it, and saying that Disney shouldn't have allowed a child of only 4 years old to board the ride at all. The lawsuit also alleged that Disney didn't do enough to aid the boy after he fell unconscious. The attorney representing the family stated that they are exposing the general public to a ride whose forces they don't really understand. Disney responded by claiming that the height restrictions on the ride were more than suitable to ensure adequate safety measures for the attraction, and that the emergency response in the wake of the child falling unconscious was handled appropriately. The lawsuit was later settled in October 2006, for an undisclosed amount. Going back to that figure of 194 people needing paramedics in the space of a year, this doesn't seem like a pretty large number. A large enough number that would make you never want to ride the ride again. But when you think about it in context, approximately 3 million people experience the ride each year, meaning that only 0.000064% of people boarding Mission Space will have a problem. And in order to combat this, Disney has removed the centrifugal spinning aspect of one of their simulators and offered this as an alternative, less intense experience known as Green Team, with the usual experience being renamed Orange Team. Later, on August 13th, 2017, Disney further distinguished the two experiences, converting the Green Team to Earth Mission, in which riders will orbit around the planet Earth, while the Orange Team was converted to Mars Mission, in which riders would travel from Earth to Mars. Furthermore, sick bags are located in front of each seat of both missions. On the 12th of July 2005, a 16-year-old girl from England was visiting Disney World with her family, and whilst there she rode on the Twilight Tower of Terror, a high-intensity thrill ride in which guests are sat in a faux elevator that rapidly moves up and down over the span of more than 100 feet. Whilst riding the Twilight Tower of Terror, the ride operated as normal, and this wasn't the first time she had rode it during her trip. However, upon exiting the ride at approximately 9:50 am, she began complaining that she felt dizzy and unwell. Her mother dismissed this by telling her that she'd feel better after a bit. Shortly after, the girl continued feeling worse and then collapsed when her heart suddenly stopped beating. After being resuscitated by emergency workers and medics, she was transported to a local hospital where she remained unresponsive. Disney then closed the Twilight Tower of Terror ride until more information was available, with the ride being checked over in order to see if this incident was the fault of the ride and could pose further danger to other guests. Disney also released a statement saying, "Our concern is for the family and we are working with them to provide whatever assistance they need." At hospital, the 16-year-old underwent surgery as it was found that there was bleeding in her brain as a result of a stroke, which is what led to the cardiac arrest. It was also noted that the girl had been experiencing pain over the past few days of her visit, and this may have only been exacerbated by riding the Twilight Tower of Terror attraction rather than that being the actual cause. Disney, as well as state inspectors, completed their investigation on the attraction, having found no malfunction, and the ride reopened the following day. The girl, however, spent the following 6 months in hospital in order to recover from the surgery and a further heart attack. The girl and her mother later filed a lawsuit in Orlando Circuit Court seeking at least $15 million in damages from Disney World, accusing Disney of being negligent in the design and operation of the Twilight Tower of Terror, citing that Disney failed to warn of the potential risks prior to boarding the ride and that the safety restraints provided weren't adequate, leading to permanent brain damage in the girl. The $15 million was claimed to be necessary to support the girl for the rest of her life. In 2012, the lawsuit was dropped as an out-of-court settlement was reached and agreed upon by Disney World and the family. The settlement was for an undisclosed amount. As the girl stated to be in pain throughout the Disney World vacation, it makes it almost impossible to pinpoint the blame onto the Twilight Tower of Terror, or even any attraction at Disney World at all. However, this is not the only life-changing injury to happen to a guest after riding this particular attraction. On the 23rd of November 2011, a 12-year-old boy from Argentina was visiting Disneyland in Paris, with his parents and 2 brothers. Similar to the previous story, the boy rode the attraction which was operating normally, then after exiting the ride, complained to his parents that he felt sick. He was then taken to the infirmary, where his condition quickly worsened, and so needed to be taken to the Necker Hospital for Children nearby. Upon arriving at the hospital, the boy's upper limbs were found to be paralysed. This paralysis then quickly spread to his lower limbs, and the boy quickly began undergoing respiratory arrest, in which he stopped breathing, needing to then be rushed to intensive care. An X-ray revealed that the boy had suffered from a spine and bone contusion, in which pressure on the spinal cord causes bruising and blood clots to form, which can then result in loss of sensation in the limbs and body. There were further complications involving contracting pneumonia, in which he had to be placed on an artificial respirator. The family said that prior to this incident, the young boy was a very healthy child, and exercises regularly with rugby, basketball and martial arts, so this couldn't have been the result of any prior condition. Disney, on the other hand, made a statement saying when he was accompanied to the care centre, the child could walk, refusing to take any accountability for the injuries, and thankfully for them, the family didn't press any charges against Disney. Unfortunately, even the castle, being the most recognisable feature and central focal point of any Disney park, is not free from tragedy. In fact, after the Florida park first opened in 1965, it didn't take too long before tragedy would strike. On the 11th of August 1977, just 12 years after the park opened, a family was waiting for the Main Street Electrical Parade to take place, and this parade took place at around 11:30 PM. Due to the long summer days, this would kind of be the earliest point they could really do it, when the sun would finally go down. Except, because of that, the light also would be limited. Together with the crowds of people, it wasn't hard for the family's 4-year-old son to escape the view of his mother and wander over to the castle. The family began searching the area, but with the parade beginning and the lights being dimmed, this endeavour was only made harder. They alerted Disney cast members, and the search continued throughout the night. Children going missing is incredibly common at Disney World. In the preceding year, there had been 11,420 children reported lost to the park, amounting to a little over 31 children each day, with none of these incidents ever resulting in a child being harmed. However, this story would end in tragedy, as at 2:15 AM, a diver pulled a young boy's body from the moat. The moat surrounding the castle was only 5 foot deep, however, this was more than enough for the young boy to drown. It's believed that the boy had climbed over the small fence around the moat, fallen into the water, and then was unable to climb back out. The family, distraught by the loss of their son, set their sights on Disney, believing that the company hadn't done enough to protect its guests. And so a lawsuit was soon filed against Walt Disney World. Disney, steadfast in their belief that the family's negligence was the sole purpose to blame, refused to settle out of court. They stated that there was adequate safety measures already in place, and that the boy had crossed 2 fences, a walkway, and a grass slope in order to access the moat. Furthermore, attorneys argued that since nobody saw the boy drown, it couldn't even be for definite that the moat or Disney as a whole could be linked to the death. In response, the family's lawyer refuted this, saying that Disney should have foresaw the possibility of a child climbing over the 31-inch, 79cm tall fence, even going so far as to, in the trial, testing 23 similar children's ability to climb a fence of that height, with all but one child managing to do so. Disney stated that the intention of the fence wasn't to stop access to the moat, but as a simple crowd control measure to keep people off the grass. Although this did go against Disney's own standards, which required any fence surrounding water hazards to be at least 36 inches high. As Disney had stated that they didn't need to abide by this rule, as the fence was in fact to prevent people from going on the grass rather than the dangerous water, they were then hoisted by their own petard, as this meant that there was in fact 0 measures in place to prevent people from entering the moat, with no barriers and no warning signs. Furthermore, the moat surrounding the castle was approximately 5 foot deep, and far deeper than the approximately 2 foot depth of Disneyland California's moat. Together with the amount of algae and the slippery slanted edges, this made the Disney World moat a definite hazard deserving of better safety measures. Surprisingly though, Disney weren't deemed solely to blame in the matter, as the mother hadn't been sufficiently watching her son and that he was in fact trespassing, although he probably didn't know that. Eventually, after 2 trials, it was ruled that both Disney and the mother were equally at fault, with each parent receiving £1 million each, with the mother's $1 million being split in half due to her accountability, thereby leading to Disney having to pay $1.5 million in total damages to the family. So next time you're enjoying all the attractions that Disneyland has to offer, just remember that some of those rides might not actually be as safe as Disney would want you to believe, and that not everyone walks away from those rides unharmed.